Hey AOTP fans, welcome back to episode 4? We're on episode 4 of AOTP for Dummies. What we're staring at today is a Nahiri build. This one in particular is a squad spam Nahiri build, kind of akin to what our Lin does, only with less range. Nahiri can also mimic what Soren does with heroes only. However, at this point in time, I don't think Nahiri's heroes builds are as good as Soren's, nor do I think her heroes builds are as good as her squad builds. I do think this is her most potent build, so we are going to review this one as my Nahiri for Dummies choice. So, same as all the other videos, things in the green boxes are the core of the army. I don't think you should be looking to trade most of this stuff out. You have 440 points between these army cards and 145 points between these, 8 spell cards. So you generally want to keep these as the base of your, this is your foundation of your army. Assuming 600 point armies and 12 cards, 200 point limit for the spells. And then on the right side we have yellow box, blue box, and a whole bunch of spells that can be traded in. So put your seatbelts on, sit tight if you want to hear the explanation and my reasoning for all of this stuff. So without further ado, we'll talk about the core figures of the army, which is Nahiri, core Hookmasters, and the Flame Wing Phoenixes. So Nahiri is probably one of the most passive Planeswalkers in my opinion. Reading her abilities and her stats, she has 7 life, 4 toughness. That's amongst the tankiest for most of the Planeswalkers. Her ability, Bulwark, she gets an additional +1 toughness while on high ground, while defending from the high ground. And combine that with her Lithomancy, that she can essentially build up to 2 1-hex sand tiles on her underneath her throughout the game. There are many parts of me that think she's mostly like a late game slash I don't really want to call it control, but she's certainly not really an aggro planeswalker. She's 3 power is not very good. But if she can sit on high ground, she's rolling 6 toughness, 6 defense dice, as long as she has high ground, because you get +1 for high ground and then an additional +1 for bulwark. She's basically one of the toughest walkers to kill, especially if you're running near-death experience in your spells. So she's very much a passive planeswalker unless you really try hard to stack the white and red planeswalker buffs. And both white and red do have power buffs for planeswalkers, so that's certainly, there's potential for that. But in this build, we're mostly utilizing Nahiri's high toughness so that we can use squads to destroy our opponents. So her job is generally just summon stuff and place high ground and underneath her and stay alive. Sometimes you can even do that on a glyph. There's nothing within Lithomancy that says you can't do this on a glyph. Only that, unless of course that glyph is on a water space. But otherwise, you can use Lithomancy, park Nahiri on a glyph, and then use Lithomancy to build high ground on a glyph she occupies. So she's a really good glyph holder for that reason. She can become ultra tanky on top of a glyph and buff your entire army in the meantime. Any of those permanent glyphs are really good for Nahiri to sit on. So moving into the creatures amongst our core figures here, we have the Hookmasters. I personally think these guys might be White's best squad creatures, and that's not really saying a lot. Unfortunately, most of the White squad creatures just aren't very good. Hookers are very average, maybe slightly above average for a squad. They're really not that great, but they're usable. I think they are meta relevant. It's more so that they have Detain, which helps you counter something like the Kessigs or other squads in Twin Flame based decks. But the Hookmasters having 3 range is also pretty relevant, especially for white and red, whom otherwise do not have range. So a 5 move and 3 range gives them some pretty reasonable flexibility if you need them to perform offense. So for the most part, I would say these guys are your core offensive figure. And Nahiri being red, and as you see here, Twin Flame is, of course, the top core spell in this build. Being red, and having Twin Flame, you're kind of going to mostly be leaning into Planeswalker Assassination, because that's just what Twin Flame does. It just outright, like, murders the hell out of a figure. So keep them protected, though. Like, they can't be a main fighting force. 3 life is okay. 2 toughness is not very good, though. They can't really stand on the front lines and fight. You would want all of the other figures in your army to be kind of the core frontline fighters, and the Hookmasters are going to more be like the Planeswalker Assassins or otherwise supporters via their detain ability to slow down an opponent's squad for 1 turn. Flamewing Phoenixes are... There's kind of 2 main things you do with them. Number 1, my primary use for them in most games, they're just cannon fodder, frankly. You just summon them, and they will probably be asleep the entire game just to kind of clog up the board. 1 life, 1 toughness, they keel over instantly. It's hard for me to want to feel... it's hard for me to want to place a lot of enchantments on these guys when they die so easily. So I usually don't place enchantments on them unless my opponent has already blown so many resources. Especially like if they've lost a lot of their powerful spells, and or let's say they send a lot of their like stronger win cons into trying to kill my other squads, that maybe I'll start trying to rebirth and snowball these guys. That is the other use, of course, is what I'm getting at, is other than being straight cannon fodder that can sometimes come back when you play a red sorcery via rebirth. The other potential, and this is very much a potential, not something you should rely on, and I'd say maybe 1 out of like 5 to 10 games this actually ever has an effect, is that you could start snowballing these guys by putting 1 kind of to the side, or whatever, hidden behind line of sight blockers like ruins or trees, or you name it. You could stack buffs, enchantments on these guys. Something like you got, we do have fire breathing over here, power of fire. You could also use like stubborn resilience, which is over here as a flex spell, but if you want to try that more often, you could try Stubborn Resilience and Blessing's up here. You could try that, especially like even if you're just trying to meme. You could meme by trying to stack a shit ton of enchantments on the Phoenixes. I think that very rarely works out, especially against blue, when they have Unsummon and all of the enchantment destruction. You pretty much can't rely on these guys to do anything against blue, other than, of course, be cannon fodder. Don't look very hard into trying to stack enchantments on these guys to win games, unless like you fully understand that it's very likely not going to work. So into the core spells now. We have Twin Flame. Twin Flame, we've already reviewed this if you've seen my Arlen video. This is probably the most busted spell in the game. So fucking overpowered. Creature you control, each cross weapon symbol you roll gets effectively causes double hits. Any Hero-scapers should be familiar with this. This is basically Deadly Strike or Deadly Shot from the Utgar minions, or like Zetacron or the Omnicron snipers. This is basically both of those abilities rolled into one and turned into a 1-turn sorcery. So this is utterly broken. Like you think of the hookers, right? They have a base of 3 power. They're basically Omnicron snipers, only with range of 3 and with more health on top of it. But one of the 3 hookers becomes an Omnicron sniper. Now the difference is, of course, with Twin Flame, and this is something Heroescape does not have, at least not in spades like as AOTP has, is the sheer number of power buffs you could stack, especially in white and red. White and red have a lot of power buff stacking. It might be even better than green and red combined, I'm not sure. It's just simply that white doesn't have Titanic Growth, which is the real problem. But white has a pretty reasonable number of power buffs amongst their enchantments, especially. You use Twin Flame, and then you add something like Inspired Charge and Fire Breathing, and you're getting +4 power. Like, let's say you take a Phoenix, because Fire Breathing doesn't work super well for the hookers, because you have to be adjacent. I guess you could still Walker Hooker in and attack an adjacent figure for Fire Breathing, so let's go with that. You could use Twin Flame plus Fire Breathing plus Inspired Charge to buff your hookers. And as long as your hooker is attacking an adjacent, let's say, Planeswalker, because that's really kind of the core. Twin Flame, you don't really want to use it to kill a squad creature. Sometimes for a hero creature, but like 70% of the time, you really want this to be used on a Planeswalker. So like you can blow up a Planeswalker with it. So you got a hooker attacking with +2 and another +2 on top of Twin Flame, doubling all of their swords that they roll. So yeah, 3 + 2 + 2 is 7. 7 dice, and then you double the number of swords you roll. So you roll 7 dice, you get an average of 3 or 4 swords, right? So you're basically averaging 6 or 8 damage. Or at least 6 or 8 hits is really the correct term. But averaging 6 or 8 hits that your opposing Planeswalker has to defend against, and that is going to very often lead to their demise. If not on the Twin Flame attack, you probably only need 1 or 2 follow-up attacks to really finish them off after that. This is the key combo card, right? You always want to combo a shit ton of power when you play this card. But moving on from Twin Flame, we have Fire Breathing. Another very powerful spell. Enchanted Squad gets +2 power while they are attacking adjacent figures. Adjacent figures means Planeswalkers too. I just messed up my view there. So Fire Breathing is going to be really good in general for this build especially. Perhaps other than for the hookers, but even then, hookers only have a range of 3. Just walk them into an engagement if necessary, honestly. But for all of the other flex creatures on the right side here, like we have Firecats and Scions in one of the flex groups, and in the bottom flex group down here we have Nobles and the Avakian Inquisitors, also range 1. So Fire Breathing is going to work pretty much for your entire army. This is really not hard to utilize. Inspired Charge. This is Fire Breathing at home. From white for 20 points. You're pretty much just using this to mimic the Fire Breathing effect. Fire Breathing, +2 power for a squad. This is a sorcery that just all creatures within 8 clear sight spaces of your walker get +2 power. +1 toughness during your own turn doesn't really matter. I don't. If and when fight becomes something that can be combined. As of right now, I think fight only exists in green in Rabid Bite. So like, there's not really many ways for white to utilize +1 toughness during their own turn. But if something like fight becomes a thing where now it's comparing your toughness to their power and then their toughness to your power, yeah, like that +1 toughness will matter. But I'm on a tangent. You're basically just using Inspired Charge to say all of your creatures get +2 power. That's kind of what this is. 8 clear sight spaces is really like almost a non-factor. I would say the overwhelming majority of combat happens within 8 spaces of your Planeswalker in almost every AOTP game. So it's like, unless you're playing a map with a lot of line of sight blockers, this is pretty much affecting your entire army. Inspired Charge is here to say, alright, I'm going to blow your ass up with hella power, and hopefully with Twin Flame as well. Similar concept to the Arlen army with Titanic Growth. This is kind of white's Titanic Growth in a way, at least if I had to try and explain it. Yeah, this is like a stim. You're going to nuke somebody with this. Again, preferably with Twin Flame. So moving on, Power of Fire. I really don't need to talk about this much. Similar to the Arlen build. This is just Enchanted Squad gets +1 power. Not much to be said. We're just trying to stack power with our squad build to assassinate the Planeswalker. Power of Fire, whatever. If it doesn't do much for you, it's fine. Don't worry too much. It's just another way to jack up your power. Divine Favor. We are. This is pretty similar. You just compare Power of Fire and Divine Favor side by side. Costs 5 points more, and your squad gets an additional +1 toughness instead of just +1 power. this kind of works with trying to stack your buffs on your Phoenixes. Not really here for anything in particular, just as a general, I need to win more. Stoke the Flames. This is a little bit tougher to use with Nahiri and all of the range 1 squads, but it's still a pretty good card. You can only enchant Planeswalker you control with it, which is fine. You kind of want to do that anyway. All figures you control within 4 clear sight spaces get +1 power. This is pretty easy to use with hookers because they have range. But yeah, and as I mentioned in the Arlen video, this is really easy to use as your figures have more range, because then they can just sit within 4 clear sight spaces and shoot things down from further away. So it's a little bit unfortunate that Nahiri is running so many range 1 figures here, but this is still pretty good, especially to blow up heroes if they are trying to approach Nahiri. Nahiri is really tanky. She's very likely to survive 1 or 2 combats with heroes, so this gives your other creatures plenty of time and plenty of power to blow up those heroes if they are coming in to kill you. It's kind of like Power of Fire and Divine Favor. This is kind of just a generic buff. It's not like a super core card as far as like your win cons, like the top 3 are. But it's just kind of an additional cherry on top. If it works, it's great. Alright, next up, Healing Salve. We're not super worried about healing fully 2 damage from a friendly creature. So number 1, Phoenixes, they can't even be healed by this. They just die instantly the moment they take damage, so you're not going to remove damage from them at all. Hookers, they could potentially remove up to 2 damage. That's fine. But every other card, like over here on the right side, we have Firecats, Scions, 2 life each. And then we have Nobles and Inquisitors, also 2 life each. So don't focus too much on always removing 2 whole damage with this card, because it can only happen with the hookers. Since it says you can remove up to 2 damage, don't worry about just removing 1 damage. The card is still doing its job. This is honestly like 50-50 here to remove maybe 1 or 2 damage and then drawing a card. Drawing a card is a very powerful effect, especially at the cost of 10 points. This gives you an additional way to just filter through your deck quicker and draw like things like Twin Flame, Fire Breathing, Inspired Charge. Yeah, so don't focus too much on removing 2 damage. Drawing a card is also very powerful here. And our final card, Seize the Day. I didn't mention this earlier earlier in the video, but when you have Twin Flame, I should have mentioned Seize the Day. Twin Flame and Seize the Day combo very well together. Again, let me go back to the Arlen video. If you haven't watched that and you're kind of confused, in case I'm missing some things, the Arlen video might tackle this a little bit better than I do in this video. But yeah, Twin Flame plus Seize the Day, since you have until end of turn, right? Because each cross weapon symbol that you rolled this turn counts for +1 hit. Well, guess what? You have until the end of turn then to take advantage of this. So this means that you can move and attack with the creature via the normal action 2, choose them as the army card and move and attack, you know, kind of like the regular hero escape turn where you just move and attack as the order marker activation. So you could do that first, and then after that combat, you know, after your combat is over, after moving and attacking, you may then play Seize the Day to move and attack with one of those squad creatures, and of course that being the guy that you chose for Twin Flame. You can move and attack with the Twin Flame guy once again. So therefore, you're now getting double dip effect on Twin Flame. So you can only use Seize the Day on red squad creatures, so that's something you got to keep in mind. But if you take like a Phoenix or a Firecat or a Bloodline Noble, who has something like Fire Breathing and Inspire Charge, and then you also use Twin Flame Seize the Day, now so yeah, you have these guys who might be rolling 7 dice, and now you're doing it twice. So if you roll 3 hits on one attack, which then double to 6 hits because of Twin Flame, and then you play Seize the Day, and then you do it again, most Planeswalkers don't survive 2 attacks that roll 6 hits or even more each. 12 hits over the course of 2 combats, effectively, at least on average. Without some obscene luck, every Planeswalker is dying to that. So yeah, I should have mentioned this sooner, but Seize the Day is a very powerful combo piece with Twin Flame. Alright, so moving on to the flex creatures. So you may choose one of these boxes to add to your army, right? You may either choose to add Firecats plus Scions, which add up to a total of 155 points. And as you can see here, this is 440 points. We have 160 points remaining, right? Talking about 600 point armies. So 155 points from these two very clearly fits that criteria and puts you at 595. So yeah, so you can add both of these guys into the army, or you can add both of these guys into the army. We have the Bloodline Nobles and the Avakian Inquisitors. And these guys cost also 155 points, 70 plus 85. So you are both of these put you within the range of 600 point armies. There's not really too much of a difference between these two armies, between these two flex picks. The general gist of this army is just spam power and blow everything up in melee combat, and both of these are still basically doing that. It's not going to be like the like between like the Jace choices or the Arlen choices, or even the Sorin choices, where like you might be choosing between something that's stronger in Planeswalker Assassination versus something that's stronger in creature control or creature destruction. That's not really happening here. This army in general is good at killing anything. There's really not much control as far as abilities and spells. It's really all control by destruction. So you know, control by combat is what I should say. Is like you're just looking to destroy things in combat, mostly looking to assassinate the Planeswalker, of course. So there's not really massive mechanical difference between these two. So the Firecats and the Scions, right? Firecats and the Scions are actually slightly more mobile than what's in the blue box. The blue box down here, they have 5 and 6 move, where Scions and Firecats have 7 move. So if you're looking for something slightly more mobile, this could potentially, like this is probably the better army if you are so like tunnel visioned on Planeswalker Assassination. The Firecats and the Scions should do it better, but they're also kind of flimsy. 2 life 4 toughness, 2 life 3 toughness. Yeah, they're not surviving much. Frankly, in a lot of games, you probably use the Scions as meat, as cannon fodder, kind of like the Phoenixes. So like you might use the Phoenixes and the Scions as cannon fodder, and then use mostly the Firecats and the Hookers as like your 2 primary offensive win cons, so that when you find a hole for either one of these squads to go in and blow up your opponent with some combination of all of your powerful buff spells, you use one of these 2 squads to go in. But yeah, I mean, the Scions are by no means pushovers once they get a couple of buffs, so don't be afraid to use them as a win con if you need to. It's just the Firecats are generally more survivable. They have haste and intense strike, so they're going to be generally stronger in combat than the Scions. What's coming up next? The blue build. So we have Bloodline Nobles and Avakian Inquisitors. And for the record, I do actually personally prefer this build more, the Nobles Inquisitors build. So this build is slightly less mobile than, of course, the Scions and Firecats, but this is going to provide a little more offensive oomph between the abilities, especially. So the Inquisitors, I'm going to start with them, because I really like their ability here, in Avakian's name. When you summon these guys, you can put a +1 power counter on another unique squad you control. This is literally every other card in your army, except your Planeswalker, of course. But yeah, when you summon these guys, you can then put a power counter on Nobles, or Phoenixes, or Hookers. I generally put this on the Hookers, followed by the Nobles, because the Nobles really like having +1 power. They like any amount of power because of their Arrogant Strike. Arrogant Strike works against Planeswalkers, so if you stack enough power, you stack to, let's say, 5, 6, 7 power, you're going to get +1 power while also trying to kill a Planeswalker. They excel, I should say, in the Planeswalker Assassination role. Like, you really want to play Planeswalker Assassination with them. But also the Inquisitors make pretty good bait to scout for things like Aether Spouts, or if you can force your opponent to use Unsummon on the Inquisitors. This means you can resummon them and trigger Infacian's name again to put another +1 power counter on your squads. So I really like them as a sort of anti-blue tech, because blue really doesn't want to unsummon these guys. they're gonna really start suffering if they give you the chance to resummon them and keep stacking power on your other squads. Righteous Purge is also pretty decent for killing heroes. It's unfortunate it doesn't work against Planeswalkers because it says it can only work against non-human creatures. But it's a slightly useful ability for killing heroes. You can stack a lot of power on these guys and roll a lot of dice against heroes. Yeah, and Nobles, I've already kind of briefly reviewed them, but their problem is, of course, 2 life and 2 toughness is amongst the flimsiest of squads. They don't survive pretty much anything. They may survive 1 combat if you're lucky, but don't count on it. Don't stack power on these guys unless you're absolutely certain they're not going to die. Like, usually at the start of the turn, frankly, is what I do, is like, I will stack, you know, these powers, these buffs on them at the start of the turn, right before I know I'm about to take a turn with them anyway. It's like, okay, fine. Like, okay, I'm going to take turn with Nobles. Here's Inspired Charge. Here's Fire Breathing. Here's Twin Flame. I've played my 3 spells. Now all my Bloodline Nobles are blowing up everybody because they have 7 power. Probably going to be having 8 power due to their ability. Because there's not a lot of figures who are going to have 7 or more power. These guys are pretty much just like a one and done. Like, you're going to use a bunch of buffs on them at the start of your turn, send them in, blow some stuff up, and then your opponent's going to be shaking in their boots for not killing them sooner, and then they'll kill them at that point if they hadn't already. But moving in, let's talk about flex spells very briefly. This video is getting to be a bit longer than I had hoped. Blessing is kind of a generic buff. +1 power, +2 toughness. This is okay, like if you want to try and stack buffs on Phoenixes, or maybe keep the Nobles alive for a bit longer, or really keep any of your squads alive a bit longer. The problem is that the squad needs to be attacked. The squad needs to be attacked for this to happen. Other spells, you know, like Incinerate would bypass this. If an opponent uses Incinerate, it doesn't trigger this. If an opponent uses something like Fell the Mighty, or Killing Wave, or Omnixilis, at any price, you know, that's not attacked by a figure. That's just destroyed by an ability, or being dealt damage by an ability. So hidden enchantment, you know, that only triggers on combat, kind of hurts this in my opinion, but it's still pretty good for what it's doing. This makes you very much the king of combat if you're using Blessing. Senseless Rage, I mostly consider this a Twin Flame / general consistency card. You mostly want to put this on your own squads so that you can re-roll a big attack. Like if you roll 8 dice with Twin Flame and you roll a base of 2 swords, you could just re-roll that and hope you get, you know, 4, 5, 6 swords, so that you're getting 10, 12, you know, whatever, some high number of hits via Twin Flame. So yeah, I would mostly consider this a, you know, kind of a Twin Flame consistency buffer, or a just general consistency buffer for your attacks. You can also place this on an enemy hero if your squads are all dead, or, you know, whatever, you're desperate. You can put this on an enemy hero and then re-roll their attack dice if they roll a big hit against you, and you know, they roll 5 out of 6 dice, you know, 5 hits out of 6 dice, and you don't like that. You can re-roll it and hope that you get less hits for their attack than what they just got. But that's kind of a desperation play more than something you should commonly do with this card. Moving on, here's Near Death. I almost put this in the core spells, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I do think this is a very good card, and amongst all of these flex spells, this is, you know, alongside Blessing and Senseless Rage, this should be one of your top considerations. I highly suggest for most builds to keep Planeswalker healing in their builds, because if your Planeswalker dies, then the rest of your spells can't be played, and your squads can't be summoned from reserved. So I kind of view this as, if you have this in your deck, you're going to have a better chance to play the other 11 spells in your deck, thanks to this one. But Nahiri is so tanky out of the box that I think this might be one of the builds that can most likely get away with not using near death experience, because Nahiri really can survive for a while as long as she's on high ground. That's kind of the important thing. But 7 life, 6 toughness is really hard to chew through in a lot of situations. She can often survive a lot of combats, especially given all of the meat that you have in this build. All the squads that you have, you're going to be running 4 squads, depending on, it doesn't matter which one you pick here, between the yellow or the blue. You have hookers plus phoenixes plus 2 more squads from these. You have 4 squads total, so there's a lot of meat that you can use to protect Nahiri on top of her high bulk. Your opponent is going to be hard-pressed to assassinate Nahiri with anything except heroes, because heroes are going to have a slightly easier time, depending on the build, but like something like the core captain or blue heroes builds, they can kind of just teleport and or fly a hero directly on top of Nahiri. But for most other armies, they're not really going to get to Nahiri very easily. So near death is, I still think it's a strong consideration. But I think this is the army out of all of them that can probably get away without having it. Stubborn, not too shabby here. This is pretty good with your Bloodline Nobles, your Fire Cats especially. Sometimes even your Hookers. When you have only one of them left, you can stack a lot of buffs on them. And then, of course, use Twin Flame on that single guy that's remaining. And suddenly he's rolling, you name it, 7, 8, whatever. You can roll hella dice on that one guy. Pretty good spell. A little bit less good here compared to the Arlinn builds because we don't have Kestic Rangers to abuse double attack with so easily. But yeah, this isn't really a core card, but it's still pretty decent here in some situations. Skillful Lunge, squad creature you control with a range of 1. Yeah, for 5 points, one of your melee squaddies getting +2 power and +1 range for a same level attack. Pretty good. For 5 points, this is a really easy squeeze in for this build. This is a very high flex card, like a high tier flex card for this build. There aren't very many better 5-point shitters for this deck, in my opinion. If you have 5 points left, it's really powerful for an army with 3 melee-based squads. Pyroclasm. Pyroclasm is okay here. I won't go too much into this. You pretty much turn one of your red squad creatures into a nuke. It can damage an opposing Planeswalker, which is probably the biggest reason why it's here. It can help with Planeswalker assassination. Not a huge, victory condition or anything here, but very usable. Sure Strike, this goes very well with the entire core of this army. Sure Strike, your entire army is killing shit via combat dice. Sure Strike says you must kill a creature in combat in order to use it, and then it makes your squad even more powerful at killing stuff in combat by giving you +1 power and +1 move, which increases your Planeswalker assassination capabilities. So a simple card. I don't love it because it requires you to get a kill in combat before you can play it, but still very usable and it's helpful sometimes. Circle of Flame, 5-point shitter, can help with Planeswalker assassination. We know this card. We love this card. Burn at the Stake. This is mostly for creature control / hero, or even I guess squad killing. But you generally want this to, I say, for killing heroes. I think Nahiri's Kryptonite is generally like a big, fat, very powerful hero. This will help you get that hero off your back ASAP. I think this is a reasonably strong consideration if you are scared of heroes and or if you don't have near-death experience in your build. Actually, frankly, you probably want near-death experience in your build before you want Burn at the Stake, because I kind of think they're used for generally the same thing, which is to say to survive fat heroes with big power coming at you. So maybe if you already have near-death, Burn at the Stake can be used in addition to that if you are still scared of heroes, which is a very reasonable thing to be scared of. Don't let me deter you. That's why it's here in the flex spells. I've played plenty of games in Nahiri where I lose to either a core captain or a Eldrazi Ruiner who sat there and beat on her for 2 or 3 turns, because it really doesn't take much if those guys are rolling 8 dice, 7, 8 dice. Nahiri will still go down in 2 or 3 attacks. It doesn't take much. You want those heroes dead ASAP. It really sucks to have those heroes assassinate your Planeswalker, so this will help you get them off of her ASAP. Shando's Outrage. A very, very simple card. I don't need to review this. This is just tap an opponent's creature for 1 damage. It's okay. it's never not going to do something, really. Sentient Masquerade, I would say, is kind of just a general offense enabler. This is never like high tier list to me. This is mediocre at best, and frankly, maybe even kind of a bad card if you ask me. But it kind of combos well with Seize the Day, and or something like Stubborn Resilience. Like if you're rolling more and more dice, Sentient Masquerade's value goes up. It's just a bad card when you're only rolling 3 or 4 dice, and I think it starts getting its value at like 7 or 8 dice. I'm pretty sure it's pretty damn good at that point. I just think it can be pretty hard to get to that point while using other combo cards. Like usually when you're trying to roll 7 or 8 dice in one turn, like you're gonna play Inspired Charge plus Fire Breathing plus Twin Flame all in one turn, which means you've already played 3 spells. And like there's just no space to play Sentient Masquerade in that combo, right? So I'm hard pressed to call this a really good card, but it has its uses on rare occasions, so it can work against Planeswalkers too, which is another pretty nice thing here. Not Forgotten. This is mostly for Nahiri, as I was saying. I probably should have put Chandra's Fury and Nahiri's Machinations in flex spells. But either way, this is kind of a way to buff Nahiri. So whenever your squad creatures are next to Nahiri and your opponent kills them via either a spell or a figure, you get to put a +1 power counter on Nahiri. This is to help Nahiri snowball into the late game. I kind of like this because it can basically help to protect your squads, because your opponent doesn't want to give Nahiri a lot of power counters. Nahiri is very survivable as a Planeswalker, and if she starts getting 2, 3, 4 power counters, she pretty much becomes a wrecking ball on her own and barely even needs her squads anymore. She can kind of just go and range down everything with her 4 range, rolling 5, 6, 7 dice. She doesn't really need a whole lot of army other than meat shields at that point. So yeah, your opponent can be hard pressed to not mess with Nahiri's squads while she has not forgotten on her and while she's next to those squads. And Nahiri is also really bulky, meaning that, like, if she's rolling 6 defense dice, your opponent has a very hard decision to make. Do they shoot at Nahiri? Do they try and kill Nahiri, who's rolling 6 defense? Or do they try and kill a squad next to Nahiri to reduce the offensive pressure against their own figures, while also giving Nahiri +1 power for each kill? It's not a great card though. Believe me, that might sound really cool on paper, but against like green and blue, against ranged armies, which are amongst the highest tiers in the game, Not Forgotten can really struggle, because you got to start chasing those figures down, which means you got to start moving your figures away from Nahiri, or move Nahiri away from your figures in order to get into a better position to chase those ranged figures down. So it's not all hunky-dory. This is mostly better into low range builds like red against other reds, blacks, and whites. It could work sometimes, but it's not great against green and blue especially. Our bottom 3 spells here, I'm going to go quick. These are all basically just squad survival enchantments. They're okay. I mean, these all trigger, oh sorry, not all these, but Marked by Honor and Battle-Wise Valor just give you additional toughness, but are triggered on attack, on combat. These aren't super high on my list of spells I want to include. One that I do think is pretty good is Spare from Evil, because it says if a creature in the enchanted squad would be dealt damage, right? So it's like, oh, okay, you could be dealt damage by a spell, by an ability. Now Spare from Evil is actually doing something compared to, adding additional toughness only for combat. Yeah, it stops Incinerate. It can help stop stuff like Dual Shot or Circle of Flame. There's a lot of stuff that this helps your squad survive so that they can keep their position. And this is very unique in helping squads survive spells and abilities, because there are not many things that can block damage from spells or abilities in AOTP. So this is pretty uniquely a pretty useful card, honestly. But for 20 points, and for its kind of total lack of offensive use, I think it's sometimes hard to fit in, especially when we have 4 squads. We don't really care too much to keep one squad alive when we have 3 other squads. So like if my opponent wants to try and melt one of my squads very quickly, I'm not really super concerned. This is basically a quadruple barrel shotgun. Like you plugged up one of my one of the barrels of my shotgun, but I have 3 others, so good fucking luck, right? But it's not super high on my flex spell list. Let me know what you think. Did I miss some creature that you think works really well here, or some spells that work really well here? Leave them in the comments below. I always listen and respond. I'm gaming. And don't forget to join the Planeswalkers Reserve Discord in the description if you want to talk more AOTP with me there. I'm always happy to also game on stuff like Tabletop Simulator, as you see on the video here. We can play AOTP digitally online. So yeah, please hit me up. I am here. I am the biggest AOTP fan. I am a shill, as a matter of fact. That's what they call me. I'm a shill for a game that doesn't exist anymore. Anyway, that's the end of this unhinged rant. We'll catch you in the next one.